Thank you, Acting Deputy President. And what would you call the offspring of communism, Marxism and fascism? And of course the answer to that is superannuation. First of all, it's communism, because in 1992 Paul Keating introduced superannuation that takes the workers' wages, didn't give them a choice, started it off at 2% and said, we're going to give it to someone you've never met and there's no guarantee you're going to get it back when you're 60. Now, just like the vaccine mandates, that money was taken from them. And do you think if Paul Keating had taken that question to an election, it would have got up? Absolutely not. Do you think if Paul Keating had said in 1992 that by 2025 you're going to have 12% of your wages taken out of the workers' wages, the workers, mind you, who built this country was built by the battlers, it wasn't built by the blowhards who were sucking the $30 billion of fees out of superannuation every year. It was built by the battlers, Acting Deputy Chair. I was just about to throw the madam in there, but I apologise for that. Okay. And I will still argue that it is a breach of the Constitution. You are taking away their property rights without any guarantee that they will get that capital returned to them when they are 60, discounted for present value. Right? Communism. Marxism. What have we got now is we've got industry super funds and we've got BlackRock and Vanguard on the private sector. And I'm not doing this from some ideological left versus right platform here. I'm doing this from the big guy versus the little guy. Okay, the little guys who get up every day, get out of bed, put their nose to the grindstone, they get the lowest wages in this country and you're ripping off 12% of their income to give it to someone they've never met so they can gouge $30 billion in fees every year. And then what you've done is you've taken that money, it's unelected money, there's no control over how it's spent, the superannuation boards are not elected by the members, so that just undermines all the powers of the individual and how their money is spent. And then the superannuation funds appoint their own directors to appoint their own ideological agendas. So when Senator McAllister says it's an ideological battle, you're straight. Can you say D-A-N-N or not? Better not say it. I won't say it. You're straight that it is. You're very correct it is, because the superannuation boards are using this for an ideological, to push their ideological boards. And last of all, and this is also fascism, because we've now got corporations that are that large and these superannuation funds have hundreds of billions of dollars under management. They are now telling governments what to do. They are that rich and powerful. Some of the money in these superannuation funds across the world are bigger than countries' economies. The power of this centralised wealth is becoming a threat to democracy, because the people running these things, like Larry Fink from BlackRock, who holds that bloke accountable? Who holds the superannuation funds accountable when they decide they want to spend money on something? No one. You do not even get to appoint the board members. And can I say, and I'm glad Senator Pocock raised this, the Productivity Commission found that $30 billion in fees are ripped out of superannuation every year. And for what? Nothing but paper shuffling. You want to know why we've got a shortage of workers in this country? Because we've got too many blowhards in this country pushing pens and shuffling paper when they should be out there actually building infrastructure, producing goods and services, rather than buying and selling shares on the stock market all day that produces nothing. It produces nothing. Okay? This superannuation and the guys that rip off $30 billion each year, that is like they make Al Capone look like Mother Teresa. This is the biggest racket going on since the Prohibition in the 1930s, mate. I mean, you want to get upset about bikie gangs. I tell you what, this superannuation funds, mate, they're extorting more money out of the workers' pockets every year, right, than bikies ever do. And I'll tell you something else. $50 billion. You read the budget papers tonight. It'll be in the tax expenditure statement. There will be $50 billion in tax concessions that mainly for superannuation that mainly go to the upper 20% of income earners. Okay? It goes to the same people in those wealthy suburbs that Labor are now mates with, the Teals, right? These guys, if you want to talk about rorts and all the rest of it, what about the tax concessions that go to superannuation? And you know what? What's the pension for? The people who get the pension are the bottom 70% of earners. So the bottom 50% of earners, they get a full pension, and the next 20% get a partial pension, right? They get very little of those tax concessions. The tax concessions for the wealthy now cost more, or just about, they're 1 or 2 billion short, now cost more than the cost of the pension. Now, I would rather have a universal pension that was. I would rather have. No, don't interject. Don't interject. This was introduced by Paul Keating. And it was pumped up all the time. And look, we shouldn't have pumped it up. And I should acknowledge Senator Richard Alston, who fought very hard against superannuation when it first came in, and we should never oppose it. The Liberal Party coalition should have opposed this from the get-go. And I'll say that to my colleague Senator Cadell, who's listening on here, because it rips out 12% of income from the regions, goes down to the and Western Australia and those great magnificent towns in regional Western Australia, Senator Stirl, and it goes to the ivory palaces in Sydney and Melbourne, where they shuffle their paper and they might come in and turn on their screen in the morning and then go and get a coffee and then go and buy a zoot suit for this weekend's triathlon, come back, get a physio. These guys are not the people producing goods and services in this country, and there is way too much money wasted on unproductive activity. And that is why I totally reject superannuation. But I haven't finished there. Of that $3.3 trillion, there's over $1 trillion invested offshore in offshore infrastructure. This country is crying out to be building more infrastructure. But you know what superannuation funds do? They don't build infrastructure, right? Because they haven't got the patient capital. The only entity that can build long-term infrastructure is actually the government, right? But these guys, what they won't do, but they'll buy infrastructure. And you'll notice how Australian Super went in and bought Sydney Airport last year, and you had the Auditor-General running around running a protection racket for Sydney Airport. They didn't want the Western Sydney Airport built, so they came up with this bogus argument that somehow we'd paid too much for the land around Sydney Airport, which wasn't true. It was anyone that knows accounting standard AASB 29, AASB 13 knows that paragraph 29 and 30 says you pay the highest market price regardless of valuation, even though it was actually valued, zoned in the airport as an airport zoning. Now, I should also add, this superannuation robs Peter to pay Paul. Since superannuation has been introduced, the number of people who retire with a mortgage has increased from 10% to 40%. Right? So you've now got people who get to 60 or 65, they retire, they pull their superannuation out as a lump sum, they pay off their home loan, and then they go on the pension. Now, I've got someone that I knew that I used to work with in Sydney at Westfield who had bought a $3 million house in Seaforth, had a $1 million deposit. He was 55. He was waiting to get to 65. He was going to pull out his pension, pay off his mortgage at Seaforth, the other $2 million, and then go on the pension. Right? So there are ways around this where wealthy people milk the system. But let me say this. If you've got a $500,000 mortgage and $100,000 in superannuation, you're getting clipped the ticket twice. You're getting fees on your actual superannuation fund and you're getting fees on your mortgage. It is much better to net off your investments rather than get clipped, get shafted twice by financial institutions. But ultimately, this comes down to transparency, and I commend Senator Pocock for actually raising this and trying to bring this disallowance into the House. And I have to say, I'm going to watch what the Greens do here very, very carefully, because they always go on about transparency and accountability. So we better make sure that they support. I'll be very disappointed if they do not support Senator Pocock in this motion, because it will highlight their hypocrisy if they don't. And it will show that they too are subservient to the union elites, not the members. Love the members. The members are the battlers of this country. And I want to be very clear here. I'm not going to attack unions per se. They have a role in this country to protect the battlers. But superannuation is not protecting the battlers. It is milking them dry. So I'd just like to finish on that note and just, as I said, the Greens, this is your chance to stand up to Labor and show that you can think for yourself, and I'm never going to let you guys forget this if you don't support this, but we need to stop the rorts, and there's no bigger rort in this country than superannuation.
Authorised G. Rennick, LNP Chermside.